Welcome everyone to today's webcast on improving customer service with SAP monitoring. My name is Dana Carlin. I'm a marketing executive here at Miracle. I'll be your moderator for today. Before we start, I would like to take this opportunity and thank each one of you for your participation and inform you that we will be holding a 10-minute Q&A session at the end of today's call. Our presenter today will be Ed Pierce, a solution architect at SEEBURGER. Next slide, please. In 2011, Miracle and SEEBURGER joined alliances to provide customers with SAP, B2B, and EDI solutions for today's ever-changing business needs. With over 18 years of experience here at Miracle, we are experts within implementing end-to-end B2B solutions, as well as providing SAP services around the clock with 24/7 support, with having delivery centers across the globe. With an unparalleled B2B integration suite of products and a managed file transfer solution, SEEBURGER stands apart from all of the competitors, making Miracle and SEEBURGER a perfect partnership. SEEBURGER's industry-based solutions ensure that specific IT requirements are fully addressed and B2B communications are made simpler and more transparent through innovation and industry standards. Next slide, please. Whether you are in the automotive, manufacturing, engineer, or energy industries, business partners need to be linked together across all sectors, along with having necessary processes in the supply chain being monitored and controlled. A supply chain monitoring tool is ideal for providing information securely and centrally on a platform in line with SAP standards. SEEBURGER's SAP Monitor is a solution extension based on SEEBURGER's Business Integration Suite and enables simple, seamless, end-to-end monitoring across system boundaries to meet the process requirements of different industries. The SCM tool plays a major role in optimizing costs, reducing risk, and enabling you to respond in real time. Now at this time, I'd like to pass the presentation over to Ed.
All right, thank you, Dana. And on behalf of SEEBURGER, I'd like to thank all of you on the call today for joining. And we will spend the next 40 minutes or so talking about improving customer service through monitoring in the SAP environment. Before we jump right into this, in case there are some folks on the call, and there very well could be, who are not familiar with SEEBURGER, I just want to give you a very brief overview of who we are as a company and how, as a company, we found our way into the particular topic that we're here to discuss today, which is monitoring in the SAP environment. So SEEBURGER is a global leader for business integration software, and we are an international company. We have 19 offices. We have clients in 50+ countries around the world, thousands of successful implementations, and our focus for many years has been on exactly what kind of our tagline says, which is business integration and enabling integration both within the business and among business partners in the outside world, outside of the four walls of your company. We'll talk a little bit more about that and how that leads to monitoring in the SAP environment coming up. We're a private company, profitable since 1986, and we remain vigilantly focused on communication standards and industry standards to enable communication across multiple industries and multiple different communication protocols. So I've thrown this slide in really not to drag along the history of SEEBURGER, but more to focus on when we started working with SAP. The company was started back in 1986, primarily as an automotive EDI solution, and we've evolved since that time. As you can see over on the right side of the screen, we've been recognized as a leader in Gartner's Magic Quadrant. The Magic Quadrant has changed over the years from B2B to more all-encompassing managed file transfer and different types of analysis, but SEEBURGER has long been recognized as a leader in the Gartner analysis. Now, the point that I really wanted to mention on this slide is that in 1995, SEEBURGER was the first company to certify its product for use with SAP R3. And since that time, we have remained a development partner with SAP. Our products have evolved. There are a number of products that leverage the SAP environment. And so as such, we have been a very close collaborator in terms of extending the reach of the SAP application outside of the four walls of the SAP environment. That really started with the EDI integration to the IDOC connector through the transactional remote function call was and still is used heavily in integrating IDOCs into and out of the SAP environment. SEEBURGER was the first to do that, and since then we have developed adapters that SAP resells for adapters to PI, and also SAP resells our Global Trade Solutions products. So we've got a long history of development work with SAP and the SAP community. So the reason I've put this overview picture up is to, number one, to show the breadth of SEEBURGER's reach in terms of business-to-business communication and the integration of those communication channels. The main thing that we're going to be discussing today is one slice of that, which is highlighted here. And probably the easiest way to describe the evolution of this particular product and this particular focus is that for many years, as I said, SEEBURGER was an enabler of EDI transmission, plain and simple, grown out of the automotive industry. And so in many cases, that was the assured delivery of electronic documents from a company to its partners and from its partners back to the company. And often that meant taking a document, transforming it, making it into an IDOC, and dropping it at the front door of the SAP world and saying, here you are, this is the document that we were to deliver. And as a matter of fact, Mr. SEEBURGER himself was relaying this story about the fact that we so often have been very good at dropping things at the front door or dropping things in the entry hallway, but then we leave it to the users in that community, the ERP community, to ensure that that business transaction actually gets completed. And so there was a real push a number of years ago to extend that reach so that our tools not only provide the assured delivery of electronic documents, but also provide the users, both business and technical users, with the ability to follow the lifespan of that document to its logical end. So when a sales order gets dropped off and needs to be imported through an IDOC interface into SAP, well, the real goal is not to get the IDOC to find a destination for it. The real goal is to ensure that there was an actual sales order created and that the sales order was processed and that product was picked, packed, and shipped and all of that. And so that's where the impetus for the SAP Monitor comes from, is to say, hey, we're really good at delivering documents, transforming documents, assuring that your communications channels are up. But as long as we're doing that, we would like to provide you a solid way to follow and ensure that all of that traffic is following through to its logical end. So that's really what we're here to talk about today. So the SEEBURGER SAP Monitor is a tool that is designed to provide you with that transparency, that regardless of how those documents are coming in our case, the core of the SEEBURGER product offering is the business integration suite, and so we have integrated that product with a wide variety of ERP environments. most notably with SAP. And so in addition to the Business Integration Suite, this product is designed to sit and watch document traffic in the form of iDocs passing into the SAP environment. Of course, in our case, if you happen to be a customer of ours and maybe running our biz server, then it's designed to work with that and monitor the documents coming in from the business integration server as well as out too, but more importantly, to monitor what's going on with those documents in the SAP environment. When we say secure here in the first bullet point, the monitor sits inside of SAP, and so it's leveraging the same security objects that all the other SAP applications are running. So in terms of your user management and your authorizations and access to various parts of the SAP environment, those are retained within this application. Same security objects are involved in viewing financial data here as they would be, for example, in viewing them in an FI transaction. Central access, that's the theme that you're going to continue to hear from me during the course of the next few minutes, which is that the idea of the monitor is that in one place you can look at not only technical documents from, say, an iDoc perspective, but also align that technical document with the logical functional application documents that are then created from it. And we'll talk more about that as we move through these slides. And then finally, a single platform. As I said, this is fully integrated into the SAP environment. It's written in ABAP. It's delivered as a transport that can be imported using your CTS functionality in SAP. And so the idea here is that we retain for you the same look and feel that the SAP community is accustomed to, so that many of the icons that you see even on this screen capture here are icons that you recognize that are used in various other display screens in the SAP environment. So we wanted to retain that sameness of feel and the single platform feel, and yet provide some expanded capabilities in that environment that are related to processing of electronic documents. Okay, so I've talked a little bit about how we evolved into focusing on the need for monitoring, and I think I'll take that one step further and move more into a scenario that makes a little more sense. And I think for most of you on this call, this isn't going to be anything surprising, but I'm trying to frame the idea of why it is that we're focused on this, and really help to illustrate why we think this can both improve service and also reduce efforts related to troubleshooting and processing documents. So, you know, the growth of electronic data interchange has been significant and over the last number of years, and as you know, for any company that is currently doing business with trading partners in an automated fashion, there's the continuing drive to enable more partners, you know, to become more efficient, to automate more processes. And as that happens, the number of different business processes, the number of messages, the number of message types grows significantly. And so even though you have improved things through automation, you have lots of different electronic messages to keep track of and to monitor. You know, just the iDoc itself in the SAP world has many different permutations and uses. So it's for this reason that if we go back to the analogy of dropping something off at the front door, well, you know, after it steps through the front door, it can go lots of different places, and it can spawn lots of different additional transactions. And this is what we're tying together in the context of the SAP Monitor. Now, what does this lead to? Well, processing delays is probably the main thing. If there are exceptions to the rule and you've got to sort through lots of different tools and lots of different document types from a technical level, can lead to delays. Can lead to increased costs if those delays are actually related to the delivery of your product. Can lead to strained relationships with your business partners if they think they've sent you something and you tell them you haven't received it, or you think you've transmitted something and you're showing an order on your screen but they haven't received it. Those types of missed communications, whether they be rooted in the application part of the transaction or in the technical part of the transaction, can be problematic. So, and then finally, numerous individual solutions for isolated problems. So it could be that if you have problem type X, you use this particular monitor or you run this report to find if a flag comes up. And what happens is those types of ad hoc solutions tend to grow, and your troubleshooting mechanisms can get somewhat out of hand, where you've got different types of solutions to solve different types of problems. To the extent that you can get one monitor that gives you the ability to troubleshoot a variety of problems, you reduce the time spent on troubleshooting. So from an analyst perspective, we've just highlighted a couple of things that actually lend some weight to why it is that we're looking at a central monitoring tool. And so I'll just step through these real quick. These are some interesting statistics. This comes to us from AMR research, but first one, 79% of all respondents related to data visibility survey say that they have a failure rate of 1%, greater than 1% for B2B data. Now, that can be really significant. Let's just imagine that in the SAP world that you process 2,000 IDOCs a day. So even at a 1% failure rate, if you're tracking down the issues related to, that would be 20 IDOCs in a day, that's a fairly, and I think both of those assumptions, 2,000 IDOCs in a day, probably for some companies not a large quantity, but to troubleshoot 20 problematic documents in a day really adds up in terms of the effort required and the man-hour spent. So we're looking at a way to streamline that process. 40% of data feeding an ERP system is sourced/generated externally. The point here is that SAP does an excellent job of integrating applications in that environment. What's interesting is that little less than half of the data moving into and out of that is external. Even though the applications are generating their own documents and they're tied to one another, you've still got a pretty significant source of data that is coming from an external source. And so if you've got a problem in processing the data that kind of as it gets over the threshold, then that's a pretty critical area to be watching. And often, and as we'll see in the coming slides, often the folks who are charged with making sure the data gets over the threshold properly aren't necessarily the ones who deal day-to-day with the underlying business process that's those technical documents you're trying to achieve. So we're trying to bring together those two, the two parties that are charged with managing this data that is sourced and generated externally. And then finally, the third one, 29% of respondents said that they had to prematurely terminate B2B testing programs related to external trading partners. Again, when we talk about system integration and EDI relationships and trading partner relationships outside of the company, there's a lot of effort put into setting up an electronically enabled automatic relationship with a partner. And there's often a lot of testing required. There's iterative testing where all the parties need to be lined up properly and the test systems need to be aligned properly. And again, if you have different members of the organization that have to be involved, you don't want to have to run through too many iterations where you might be testing communication with a partner on a technical level, but only find out later that there was a problem with the actual content of a certain type of document, which might only be recognized by someone on a functional level. So if with a tool to give you visibility of the document from a technical perspective all the way through to the successful posting of the document at a functional level, can help to improve those testing cycles. So, okay, I'll move here to a series of slides that kind of illustrate this point, where on the right side you've got various different things that could be going on. There could be internal transactions, just your typical business process transactions that are taking place in SAP, whether they be sales orders, requisitions, deliveries, shipments, purchase orders, the like. Then you could have master data or reporting type requirements. All these things are just that are on a daily basis going on in the SAP world. At some level, the information about those different transactions is only available by those who are authorized. So you may have some folks who are only authorized to process iDocs, or that's what their focus is. And then on the left side of this slide, we'll move through a couple of iterations here. You've got the business users who are not preoccupied with the technical details, but are the ones who are charged with actually entering data into the system or monitoring that data. What is the sales activity, procurement activity, production planning activity that's going on in the application itself. So what you have is, on the one hand, an IT EDI expert who has lots of access to the excuse me, the metadata or the information about those transactions. And oftentimes that person might not even have access to the functional side of the equation. And so what happens is, if you've got those business users that through whatever means find out that there has been a breakdown in a process, or that they've been notified by a supplier, that, well, you told us you were sending the order, but we never received it. So when those folks have issues, often they are coming to the IT expert asking for resolution of the issues, perhaps in the context of what they know, which is customer name, supplier name, material number, those types of pieces of information. And it can often result in a bottleneck where, number one, they're speaking a language that the IT expert doesn't speak on a daily basis, and number two, you've got everyone needing to go through kind of a central point of contact to follow what it is that has broken down in the process. So the solution here is the SAP Monitor that we put in the middle of the picture now. And the idea is that you've got a central tool that puts together on a single interface information that both parties in the organization can understand. So you've got in the same interface the same display, perhaps an IDOC number, a technical information about a particular IDOC type and a transaction that it supports, right alongside application information. So a sales order number, a customer name, an address for that customer. And so in that interface, both of the parties involved, or at least depicted on this slide, can have the ability to both query and filter and look for items that they might be trying to correct, all in the same interface. And we'll take a closer look at this as we move through these screens. So again, I promise you we'll move to a different screen capture in a few minutes, but just to recap the themes here, the things that we are achieving with the SAP Monitor is, number one, transparency, and as the first bullet point says here, standardized display of heterogeneous content. That's what I was just talking about, which is that that we're pulling together both technical communication-related IDOC information, along with not only the functional information from the application, but also quick links if you need to jump from this interface to various parts of the system to make changes. One thing that I haven't stressed too much here is that we're not attempting to reinvent the wheel here. So for example, what you see here, there are, I'll get to it in the next couple of slides as well, but if you needed to branch from this screen directly to the sales order or directly to a delivery, we're still leveraging the same SAP applications that are supported in this environment. We haven't created new core applications. We are just putting a more complex monitor that sits on top of those to give you ready access and to give you a synchronization of the content from both the technical communication side as well as the application side. The role concept, I mentioned this a little bit at the outset, which is that we've got extended role and authorization objects to permit governance of and separation of responsibilities where necessary. So we're leveraging not only the SAP roles and authorization objects, but a few additional SEEBURGER developed authorization objects to ensure that from an audit perspective and from a security perspective, that you still got the right people with access to see the right information, but nonetheless give an interface that, where possible, enables the consolidation of that information. Direct access to the different data and functions. This alludes a little bit to what I was talking about earlier, which is that you see a number of buttons, and we'll take a look at this this busy screen on a little more close-up basis, but we're providing access to all of those underlying SAP applications that you might need to branch to in the case of troubleshooting, or in the case of following the flow of a document. Escalations management, proactive notification of errors. So the Monitor application also contains features around setting tolerances around some of the functional transactions to, if there are certain conditions that arise, the Monitor itself can generate notifications such that those who are, in a proactive manner, those who are responsible for checking or validating, whether they be quantity tolerances or date tolerances or whatever, are proactively notified when certain conditions are violated. And then finally, it's a ready-to-run application. As I said, it's something that's fully integrated in the SAP environment. it's a pre-configured package. So what we deliver is actually two transports. One transport is an implementation guide. So for those familiar with deploying SAP or deploying various applications within the SAP environment, we have developed an individual implementation guide that contains the steps and the configuration tables that sit beneath this application. So the configuration of this application is just like the same steps that you'd be accustomed to with any other configuration steps in SAP. So we deliver that implementation guide, and then we deliver a separate transport that has the monitor itself, the application that you're seeing on these various screens on this presentation. Okay, at this point I referred earlier to the fact that I will take a closer look at some of these screens, and what I'd like to do here is move fairly quickly through a series of screens to just compare and contrast what I've been talking about in terms of the different types of users that you might have in your organization, and we'll take a quick look at some of the transactions that those people, perhaps it's the people on the call. Some of you might have direct interaction with SAP in one or more different capacities, and so but in order to illustrate that for the broader audience, what I'd like to do is take an actual look at some of these screens and compare how you might do things today to how you might more easily do things with the monitoring tool. So I'll focus on a couple of different areas here. Number one, I've talked a fair amount about IDOC monitoring. And then we'll keep coming back to this screen just to track, but we'll take a look at IDOC monitoring. We'll take a look at actual physical output, printed output, and labels and such, and then we'll take a look at an example from sample transactions in the SD world. So if we look at what is available in the standard SAP environment, in this case we're looking at just a sampling of what someone who works in the IDOC world might use on a day-to-day basis. And this isn't necessarily everything, but it's just a sampling. And the main thing that I want to illustrate here is, for example, if you wanted to take a look at the technical level at IDOCs and the successful processing of those IDOCs, you could go to transaction WE02, which is what we're looking at here, display IDOCs. And similarly, if you wanted to generate IDOC list, there's WE05, and if you wanted to monitor IDOCs, now here it says, based on business content, that there's a different transaction, WE09. And so I think you get the idea that each of these different transactions and screens gives you the ability to look at a certain slice of activity that's going on. And in this case, you start with an IDOC perspective. If you don't have an IDOC perspective, some of these transactions are fairly cryptic. So you wouldn't want to take someone who is in customer service trying to solve a problem and give them a series of technical transactions and say, see if you can track down the order that you were looking for and where the problem was. You'd probably have a collaborative effort going on there. We talked a little bit about testing. So yes, there's a testing tool in the standard SAP world, but once these tests are executed, again, you haven't necessarily covered the entire spectrum of not only processing the IDOC, but then seeing in one nice, neat picture what became of that, or if there were processes executed later on in perhaps subsequent rounds of testing or subsequent steps in a process, those aren't going to be visible in just an isolated testing tool. So, and then you've got various different monitors. In this case, you see you've got monitoring for, at a functional level, different types of IDOCs. So all of these you can get at individual pieces of information, but you've got to step through, as we've just seen, 6 or 7 different transactions depending on the angle that you're coming from and the nature of the information that you're processing. So we jump over to the right side of the screen and contrast that a little bit with the SAP Monitor. So this is a slightly different flavor of the screen that we've seen in some of the previous slides. But what you've got here is a combination. So I'll start on the left side of the screen here. We've presented different views of information. For example, if you wanted to look at documents in terms of you're familiar with scheduling agreements from the functional side, or you're familiar with order processing from the SD perspective, or invoicing and billing from from the financial perspective. We prepared views of the information that are logical for those different business processes. If we look down on the left side, on the bottom part, there's a tree that provides the directional information that we saw on some of the IDOC monitors. Are we talking about inbound or outbound processing? If so, you see all in one tree here, these are all the different types of IDOCs that are being monitored and that are passing in and out of the system. So in one overview, you've got not only functional but technical information. And then clicking on any of these at the status level, you notice you've got different counts. Clicking on any one of these items in the tree on the left-hand side will give you the grids on the right-hand side. Now, the upper part of the grid, for those who are more technically inclined, gives an entire overview of all the different IDOCs being monitored in the system, and then all the different statuses that those IDOCs could have. So for someone who is technically inclined, you might focus right in on, for example, status 51. And status 51, I believe, indicates that there was a problem processing the IDOC. So in that case, this gives you a very easy way to, I think status 51, document not posted, versus status 53, which was document successfully posted. So clicking on any one of these items in this top grid then gives you the whole listing of all of those individual IDOCs that have been processed. And then what you see if we look left to right in this screen is that you've got the joining together of both technical and functional data here. So not only do you have the IDOC number, the IDOC status, and some date time information, but you've got things like sold to point, shipped to point, sales document number. And you notice that the items that are underlined are even, each of those underlined areas has a hyperlink to the actual transaction. So if I were to click on sales document number, I would be taken to VA03 for the SAP transaction for display sales order. So again, we are, through all of these links, we're still tied into the SAP environment, but our jumping off point is central. And so that's really what we're trying to achieve here when we talk about bringing together both sides of the organization. I mentioned this briefly when you look at transaction output. In many cases, you may have reasons for having physical documents that are generated. Those physical documents might actually be orders that need to be filed somewhere, though I know many organizations are trying to reduce the amount of paper they generate. They may actually be labels or something, or you may just be looking at what did that physical document say, and you've got a virtual attachment to various documents in the SAP world. Well, in standard SAP, you've got an output controller and spool transactions that are somewhat cryptic, where you queue data up for output, and if you ever need to go back and figure out what had happened, or you need to reproduce one of those documents, you've got to kind of quit what you're doing and branch to the transactions related to output control, and you would see something like this screen that we see on the right. So we realized that in the course of identifying errors or anomalies, you may actually need to refer to some of these documents or regenerate them, or whatever the case may be. And so what we built in to the monitor is, as you've got a particular document highlighted, if that document needs to be rendered on the screen, we've got a PDF generator that can simply on the same screen, render the human readable versions of these documents. So again, not that these things can't be done in the standard SAP environment, where we're trying to put the features where you need them in order to make the process more efficient. Similarly, we've got, if you've got documents that contain attachments, here's an example of a document with an order label. So if you need to view those attachments that are a part of that document that's being passed along through the system, again, you have an attachment viewer so that you can just generate that information right out of the monitor itself. And finally, we'll move from the technical perspective to the more functional perspective, which is taking a look at a day in the life of someone, for example, who deals with the sales and distribution module within SAP, as an example. And the same case is generally true here, that if you look down the list on the left-hand side, these are just a sampling of some of the things that someone who worked with the SD application might use on a daily basis. Change customer, change order, change delivery, picking waves, et cetera, et cetera. Now, it is important to point out that these transactions do not get replaced. We're not trying to replace what's going on. As a matter of fact, someone who works in this environment works in these transactions in order, on a day-to-day basis for items that are not automatically imported into the system. And so there's definitely a reason that people work daily in these transactions. However, the flip side of that is that generating transactions is one thing, whether it is done by resources manually or whether it's done by automated processes, but troubleshooting them is a little bit different. And so as you see here, we've got a screen for change customer sales order, a different screen for change outbound delivery. If you're a person who works in these day-to-day, you've likely committed these to memory. You know the transaction codes. You know how to get to these screens. Nonetheless, you're still, if you're troubleshooting something, you're hopping from, you might have 6 or 8 different, different sessions open, and you might be hopping back and forth from one of these transactions to the other in order to resolve an issue or identify where there are data inconsistencies. So again, we go back to the monitor, and in this case, we've got just one of the links that was opened up, which is that you start at the same dropping off point, or jumping off point, should I say, starting in the monitor. And okay, so you needed a branch to take a look at the delivery. You can simply link from, well, I see where the red light is related to this IDOC failure. Let me jump from here and take a look at what might be going on with, is there an issue with that delivery? Maybe not. If not, I'm just backing right back to the central point that I started with, and from there I can branch somewhere else. And so it's pulling together all of these functional links, if you will, in a logical fashion, so that you're looking at the error conditions as they happen, and linking to where some of the areas might be that you make corrections or identify what the problems are. Okay, so I'm hoping that gives you guys a good feel for the objectives of this particular tool, and hopefully you can see, I realize I've given some fairly narrow examples of functional areas and technical areas within the SAP world, but hopefully that's enough to give you a taste of what the purpose of the monitor is, and get a feel for where SEEBURGER comes from in terms of believing that it really makes sense to not only deliver and facilitate electronic transactions, but also to continue to provide you visibility with what's going on in the application once those transactions are posted. So just to recap a couple of things here, we've talked about integration a great deal, and from an SAP perspective, this is a solution that sits in the SAP environment and supports full integration with the SEEBURGER Workhorse product, or the business integration server. So again, the benefit that we're looking for here is traceability and transparency across the supply chain. So we're not just looking at a confirmation of a point-to-point delivery of data, but we're looking end-to-end to make sure that the goal of that business transaction was achieved. And then finally, the focus is to make it an intuitive interface for not only technical users, but for business users. And so you can put something in the center where you've got both parties, no matter which side of the house you come from, that can at least have a central tool that enables them to align information that each one is familiar with. From the business benefits perspective, you've got really a low total cost of ownership for a monitor like this. Low project costs. We're really talking about something that can be configured and deployed on the order of weeks rather than months. Also, there's no specific SAP industry solution. You may see in certain SAP solutions where they perhaps have a great monitoring tool, but that tool was delivered as a part of a certain industry solution. So the point here is that this is kind of independent of any specific unique SAP product that's designed for a generic environment. Again, we've talked about this, but the increasing customer satisfaction through process acceleration. The idea here is to more efficiently handle the anomalies that might slow down your day-to-day business, and finally to avoid a bottleneck where you've got too much information or too many requests for information flowing through a certain part of the organization. So open something up that multiple types of users have access to in order to alleviate that bottleneck. So I think I've covered really the highlights. I hope that gives you a good introduction to the reason that SEEBURGER has pursued this, and kind of the history behind where we came from as an organization, and why it made sense to us from a development perspective to expand the visibility to ensure the success of the documents that we've been delivering and integrating in systems for many, many years. So at this point, I think we can open up for questions, and I think the best way for us to manage the questions is through the interface that you're provided in the webinar. The main reason I say this is that, number one, we had nightmares in crosstalk with opening a large number of lines at the same time. And the second is that for any questions that I don't get to, those questions are recorded, and we will most certainly follow up with anyone on a response if we don't get to something during the course of this call. Okay, so I see first question here, is there any error analysis function for failed IDOCs? Probably the best way to answer that is that the analysis that you're gonna get in the tool itself is really going to be links to, as I've described, links to the same tools that you might have leveraged in SAP before. The difference is going to be the access to those is all going to branch from the same source. So I'm hoping I got the question right. If you're asking about some type of additional error analysis functionality over and above what is available with the standard IDOC monitoring tools, to my knowledge, I don't think there's something over and above that. I will follow up on that, however, and make sure that that if there's anything specific that I follow up and provide additional information. Okay, well, I don't see any other questions coming across. We will have the connection open for a few more minutes, and it will continue. If there are questions that come up before we cut the audio portion of the call, we'll certainly take those and follow up accordingly. If not, I think I've kind of reached the end of my portion of the presentation, and Dana, I don't know if you want me to take it back to you.
I can wrap it up real quick. It's not a problem. So I just wanted to thank you, Ed, for the educational presentation, and again, thank you everyone for your time. If there are no other questions, like Ed said, of course, we can. We'll leave it open. If you guys do have any questions that you want to input, we will reach it back out to you. Again, thank you, everyone. I'd like to wrap it up. And if you do have any questions or feedback, feel free to reach out to Ed, myself, or Michelle Jones. So contact information is right on the screen. With that, thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a great weekend.